everyone, welcome to the studio. It's demo day and I'm really excited because I'm going to demonstrate how to paint something with just the limited palette of assorted pastels that I have been talking about this month, the Rowney set of 16 assorted. And if you haven't seen some of the earlier videos on the review of the set and how I mix color or alter the colors, be sure to see those because it will help give you more information. And I just want to share with you again, you don't need this set. These are just very basic colors, but they are limited in color and value range. So they're all kind of pure intense colors, and they're all pretty dark middle values. So we're going to have to do some fancy layering to get different colors. So we're painting marshes this month. So I want to paint a marsh scene for this particular demo. So here's my reference photo, and I'm going to just dive right into the painting right now. So the first thing I look at, and I see that there's a lot going on in the foreground, so I'm going to make it about the water leading back into the distance, which means I'm going to raise the horizon and show more grass and less sky. And then we've got a little bit of trees, the tree line. There's some houses in the trees, which I may add, but that will be at the end. There's some distant land, and it's very foggy, this particular scene. It's kind of foggy. So I'll see if I can get that to work with this limited palette. Now we've got the water. Now last month we talked about pathways, and waterways are the same as pathways in that we have to make them look like they're part of the landscape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the shape of the land, and then hopefully the water will magically fall into place. So we've got this bank over here, grass is sticking up over here, and then we have a little jut of land right in here, and then it goes like this, and it actually jogs a little bit. It's not just straight across, which will make it more interesting. And then voila, the water magically appears, and all I did was draw the actual land. Let's just see where this ends. Alright, so there is our drawing. Now, how are we going to block it in? What are we going to do for an underpainting? I'm going to just do a dry wash underpainting. And because I want it to look really moody and overcast, I want to think what colors would really work well for the underpainting. And I'm thinking that if I go with some blues and greens, that might give us a head start on that feeling of foggy moodiness. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to block in the tree line, and I'm going to use the dark blue. Now, remember, I'm only able to use this particular set of pastels, so I'm very limited. And I look and I say, where else do I see dark? I see dark in the middle of the field. I see dark on the edge of the water, the bank right there. And that goes over this far. And then I see some dark up on the bottom edge of this particular, this side, the left-hand side of the marsh. But I don't see dark on this right part of the marsh, because if I did, that would look like a bank on both sides, and it would be more of an aerial view. But what I will do is I'll add some dark down here at the bottom just to kind of ground the grasses a little bit. But I'm not making another bank, if that makes sense. Oftentimes we paint waterways and we outline the banks, and it makes it look like you're looking down at the water instead of looking back into the water. Alright, so that's one layer of dark. Let me just scoot this over all the way to the edge. This is just the underpainting, so we're going to just leave this alone. I'm not going to start layering it. I'm going to rub this layer in. But what could we put in as an underpainting for the grasses? The grasses have a lot of golden, reddish brown color. I think this time, and I very, very rarely do this, those of you who've seen me paint a lot know that very rarely do I go right with local color. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put in what I see as the bulk of the local color, which is this reddish brown. And that's just going to give me a head start. I don't really need a lot of color in this painting because I'm going for that moody, quiet quality, right? I'm going to lighten it in the distance with using this yellow ochre right in here. But that's going to be all for now. This is the first layer. So now I'm left with the sky. I really want it to be moody. If I make it blue, it's going to look like a sunny day. If I make it purple, that could work, and it could work. But I'm going to take my chances and go with green. I know this seems really weird, and maybe it's not going to work out, but this is how you learn. You try things. Something inside your head says, you know what, go with green. And then you say, you do green and it's like, ah, but I think it might work. And then because it reflects, water is reflecting the sky, I'm going to add the green down in the water. Now, the green is a little bit too dark of a value, obviously. So I'm going to add a little bit of the white in there. Remember, if we want to get a lighter value, we can add white. Same thing to the water. And there we have our first layer, but I'm going to take a piece of that pipe insulation foam, and I'm going to rub in this whole first layer. I really want to cover the paper. We talked a lot about block-in and underpainting and paper color last month. And in this case, I really want to get this really nice, soft, out-of-focus feeling to this painting, so that when I go on top with other layers, there's something to respond to. Color, shapes, and then let's just go with the also, by rubbing it in, I'm already starting to get that feeling of foggy, mistiness that's present in the marsh. So that's the first layer. That's the block-in. That's called a dry wash underpainting. And now I'm going to move forward and start layering with making more complex layers and adding the detail. So first thing I'm going to do is reinforce the dark areas. I don't like this line. I extended it over, but now it looks like a worm. This looks like a worm. I don't want worms in my painting, so I'm going to have to work with these areas, which I will, but I'm just pointing it out. So I'm taking the blue, reinforcing, because I rubbed a lot of it away, so now I have to get rid of it. I'm going to start to break up the worm by pulling some of the grasses down into the water. So I'm getting a head start on my reflection in the water. There's a little bit of dark kind of in this part of the grass, and some darks over in here. Now, how can I get rid of this line right here? I'm going to add a little bit of violet, and I'm going to put in what I consider more distant land. That's a little bit too warm of a color, so I have to dull it down a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of green. Yeah, and that gets rid of my line, and then I get kind of a nice soft green with a little bit of violet in it. And we'll work on that a little bit more. All right, I have one layer in my darks, but I want it to be more green than it is. So I'm going to work my way to green, but I'm going to add a little bit of brown. I'm not really worried about the buildings yet. If I do add them at all, it's going to be right at the end. And now I can go ahead and add some of the green lightly. if you want these optical blends that I'm talking about where the layers kind of work together, you want to use a light touch. If you press too hard with your pastel, then you will physically blend the layers together and it'll just make mud. Now, one thing that I'm noticing is it's all kind of the same height. So I'm going to work on the sky next, and I'll use the sky color to carve into the tree shapes to make them more interesting. So I went with green in the underpainting, and I think the green is okay, but it is a little bit too dark and almost a little too green. So I'm going to add a little red violet in there, take my white, lighten it. So I'm kind of giving it more of a pink, a little bit of a pink glow. Let's go back with the green. Now, the one thing that I've discovered when working with this very limited palette is that I have to go back and forth several times to get the colors that I really want. And when we're working with more of a larger palette, that's not really necessary, right? You have the color in your hand, you pick it up, you put it down, and you're good to go. But in this case, if we're trying to change the colors, we've got to go back and forth several times. And especially when you're trying to make something lighter, I really want to be careful that I don't get it too white and chalky looking. Right now there's a lot of white, so I'm working by layering the colors to get to tone down. Ooh, let's add some of this green. Now it's really moody. Look what happens now when I put the white on top of the yellow green. Now we got a little bit of a yellow fog going on. That's kind of cool. I kind of like that. Let's add a little bit more violet. So you're really going to find that it's a matter of playing around, going back and forth, and not being afraid to experiment. A lot of times when I do a demo, I kind of have an idea in mind of what's going to happen or what I want to happen. In this case, I will admit I really don't. I'm playing around with it, just like you guys will be. Now, I want to create a feeling of haze, so I'm going to take that white pastel and very lightly put it over the top, the tree tops, right, just to kind of disguise them, push them back like it's very, very hazy. And I'm going to just pull down some of the white pastel and kind of make some sky holes just to break up the shapes a little bit. Alright. So there's my sky. I think now I'm going to work on the grasses, and then when I get about this far, I'll do the water. So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to work from the back to the front. Alright, so what did I do? I put some violets and red violets in the sky. So because I put them in the sky, I want to add them on the ground. Why? Because I want what's happening on the ground to relate somehow to what's happening in the sky. It could be color, it could be shapes. In this case, it's going to be color. So if there's a little bit of a color in the sky, I'm going to make sure that I have that color somewhere on the ground. So by adding some of these violets down in the grasses, it helps kind of get that feeling. What else did I add up into the sky? I added the different greens. So I'm going to add those greens down into the grasses as well. There's a lot of that yellow-green kind of mixed in these grasses. Alright, so I need to go back to the distant area now that I've covered up the grasses with some color. Also, notice I left the orangey color still there, so these layers are all working together to be a little bit more interesting and more complex. And that's what you have to do when you have a really limited palette like this. I'm putting the brown right in here in this distant grass just to break it up so it's not going to be just one color brown. And now I'm going to come in with the yellow ochre, and I got to get close. I'm just, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm using the pastel and I'm creating a linear mark all along the back edge of this marshy area. And one thing about marshes, if you want it to look like a marsh, it has to be completely flat, level, where it meets the horizon, or it will look like rolling hillside. So I think it's sloping down a little bit. Sometimes you can't tell till you step back from it. I made a couple of little jogs, a little bit of a variation in where the bushes are, so that it doesn't look like just this big straight line going across. So as I come forward, I'm going to start to introduce that red, the reddish brown again. Layer it with some of the yellow for variety. What about this warmer brown color? And then when I get probably right in this area, I'm going to start to change the direction of my marks. But the other thing that I need to do is I need to make the banks a little bit darker. And what that will do is will help create a better feeling of depth in my marsh, because I'm not going to have the darks as dark as they are here in the distance. It's going to get lighter. So I have to make these darker. So I'm using the black, because the blue that I have in this set is just not quite dark enough. Now you can see by just me adding that black right in that area, it makes that feel like it's further back. But black, as we said earlier, I've said in the other video, tends to be very dull and flat when it's used by itself. So I'm going to layer, where's my green? Some of the greens on top, just to modify it a little bit. Now I'm going to take my finger, because we're going to start making reflections, and I'm going to pull down those darks into the water. And now I'm going to come in with the rest of the grass. But before I do that, I'm going to do a quick spray with my fixative, just because I like fixative to create texture. This is my fixative Blair, very low odor, workable fixative. It's dark in this area even more, but I can come in and start to change the direction of my marks. I see that there's some green down in the banks back in here, and I'm going to take that yellow ochre and I'm making my marks go up and down rather than across, and that is to show that we're getting closer. So the closer you get, the more detail that you see in the grasses. Let's add a little bit of violet in there, just because that kind of looks like some of the dead grasses. Well, they all are on their way out, aren't they? They're autumn grasses. Sometimes you have different colors in the grasses. They have grasses with mauve tones, purple tones, green grasses, golden grasses. Oops. Alright, so let's go with our reddish brown as we come closer. I'm not painting any single blades of grass yet. Notice I have not addressed the water, and I really have to do that before I go much further. But what I want you to notice is look at how the water is just kind of appeared by itself without me even doing anything to it. That's because I've been painting the ground around it, and I'm letting the water just kind of magically appear. So let me just pull this bit of grass up, and then what I put in the sky is what I'm going to put in the water. So I have to remember what I put in the sky. I put green. But one thing I'm going to do when I paint the water, I'm going to use horizontal strokes. And it wasn't just green, it had some white in it. I can blend it in to get it really nice and smooth and glassy looking. And I usually like to blend things in, but sometimes you need that just to get the feeling that you want. What else did I add up there? I added some yellow green, remember? So let's throw a little bit of the yellow green in there. And then I put more white on top of that. And look at how it changed it. It's really cool. And then it just kind of sneaks behind that bank just a little bit. So I'll just take that green, a little bit of white, and just tap it with my fingers so it shows that it's going behind that bank. And then finally, I'm going to come and I'm going to add those individual grasses. This is the fun part. Now normally, when I'm at this stage of the game, I tend to take out the new pastels to get those finer marks. But in this case, this particular set of pastels, I actually really like the hard, sharp edges that are on the tip. So if you turn it to its side, you get this really nice sharp edge. And that works really well for the grasses. I'm just taking some of those colors and paint some of the individual blades of grass. This is where we do the dancing with linear, lyrical marks in your grasses. And again, it's very easy to get carried away with grass marks, so typically when I'm at this stage, when I'm doing grasses, I'll do a few and I'll step back. I'll do a few more and I'll step back. And that really helps me from overworking and doing more than I really need. I'm using the lighter gold again just to kind of put in some of those brighter grasses. And I think just got to create a little bit of the current line where the water meets the grasses. So I'm using the white on its side and then just tapping it down with my finger. If you put that everywhere, then you overdo it, you know. But if you can put it in a few key places, it really helps. So I'm going to stop right now because I think you get the idea of layering your colors, using black, using white to alter the value, and that even with a limited palette, if you really push it, you can actually create what you want. And so it's a lot of fun. And I hope you've enjoyed this demo and the future demos to come this month and have fun with a limited palette. So let's paint.